Thank you, Trent. Thank you for everybody for being here. My name's Tiffany Couch. I'm a certified public accountant, certified fraud examiner. I'm sort of a non-traditional CPA, so you don't come to me to get your tax returns done. My clients come to me to basically figure out what's happened to their money, put cases together, and often testify in court. I got involved with the CRC rather innocently. I was asked by a private citizen to look at about 10,000 documents because he had asked the Columbia River Crossing for the cost of the project. At that time, 2 years ago, it was $108 million. And when he asked for the cost or the backup for the cost of the project, they sent him 10,000 documents, and he thought he should hire me to go through those documents. And I said, no. Let's just spend a few hours of my time. We'll ask for the right report. It's a government agency. You have to understand governments do things a little differently. We'll get the report. I'll hand it to you. I'll tell you what it means, and we can part ways. Well, that was 2 years ago. And unfortunately, the Columbia River Crossing Project Office told us in one of those earlier meetings that they were unable to print an accounting report, and in fact, to date, have been unable to print a simple accounting report that supports the $168 million that they've spent thus far. So what I wanted to do today is kind of go through some of the things that I've uncovered in the last 2 years, some questions that I have. I did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation because I wanted to show you the CRC documents themselves, because everything that I'm talking about today, they're based on the Columbia River Crossing's own documents. They're not Tiffany Couch numbers, they are CRC numbers. So in the last year, I have published 5 different reports. 4 of those came out in the fall. And each of those, I have said, in my professional opinion, that the Columbia River Crossing project there's a severe lack of accountability and transparency, and there are enough irregularities to warrant an investigation. Somebody needs to take what we've already started with and say, really, what's going on here, and dig in. So I'd love to go to document number 1. We're going to work with the guys in the back, hopefully, to pull up the right documents. So instead of handing me a report that says, Tiffany, here's how we spent all our money, the CRC has given me 30,000 lines of data in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that has the columns. There's just so much data, it's hard to grasp. So what we've done is just said, okay, who are the vendors and how much have been paid? So out of all of this data, we've just summarized what the CRC is telling us. And I can't read from there, but to date, through September 30th, 2012, they've spent approximately $163 million. And if you can see there, the majority, 67%, has gone to one vendor, David Evans and Associates. Yeah. Thank you. Hopefully it won't fall off the stage here. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that either. So, 67% has gone to one vendor, and we're going to get to that vendor in a moment. I think there's about $20 million there, a little more, that we have no idea where that money went. That money is likely for payroll, but it's basically in the vendor column, instead of having a vendor name like Acuity Group or David Evans and Associates or whoever, it just says DW not required, or it's just blank. And so they've indicated to me that those are journal entries, and I said, okay, great, can I get the backup for the journal entries? They ended up writing a 4-page white paper to explain to me what a journal entry is, and for those of you who are non-accountants, it would be like explaining to a dentist how to do a cavity filling, right? Journal entry, I understand what a journal entry is. I wanted the information. Rent is a big one. They're paying about $30,000 or more in rent per month. So I want to go to that David Evans contract. Back in 2005, the CRC said, we need a professional engineering firm to get us through the environmental impact statement process. And the federal government says you have to go through this process, a draft, a final, in order to get a record of decision to be approved for a project and go forward. And so in July of 2005, or May of 2005, they gave David Evans and Associates a $50 million contract to do just that. As of July of 2012, the David Evans and Associates contract stands at $131.2 million, almost three times what the original contract was for, and there's not been any change of scope. They're still going to do the draft, the final impact statement, and the record of decision. There were some problems with this. According to both state and federal government, they were required to look at 3 firms before they provided a contract to a firm, and the state of Washington did not do that. David Evans and Associates was the only professional engineering firm to provide their statement of qualifications, and they were handed the project without the state of Washington looking at any other firm. They were also required to do a conflicts check. David Evans and Associates from 1999 to 2004 conducted multiple studies on the I-5 corridor, and it was interesting. I think it was Joe that had another study they did in 2009 on tolls. David Evans and Associates' own work from 1999 to 2004 said I-5 is full, I-205 is full, we likely need a third and or a fourth crossing. So it's interesting that in 2005, when the Columbia River Crossing project started, it automatically said, well, we're only going to look at the I-5 corridor. So it was not matching what David Evans and Associates had already done in those 5 years prior. So, according to a recent CRC document I received about 2 weeks ago, as of December 11th, 2012, so just 2 or 3 months ago, the project office had spent a total of $168 million. I want to talk to you about the cost of the bridge. If we can go to document number 2. One of the things that Mr. Courtwright talked to us about was the CEVP report. And when we read the newspaper, we think about the Columbia River Crossing project, we think about a $3.5 billion project. This comes from the Columbia River Crossing CEVP report, which I've just summarized here. I want to show you that where I get these numbers. And they basically are saying, okay, folks, we are going to average, or we think we have a 60% probability that this will be a $3.1 billion project, and we're 90% sure that it'll be $3.5 billion. Please go over to the left, scroll over to get to the top left of that document. But did you guys know that this $3.5 billion project that they're telling all of us about is a phase 1 project? A phase 1 project means the following are going to be eliminated: the Victory Braid, the Marine Drive North flyover, and the northbound connection at SR 500. And I get that information from document number 3, but we're not going to open that. So just know that their actual budget says this is a phase 1 project. That $3.5 billion number you've been hearing about is going to eliminate all of these northbound interchange fixes that I think most people think that they're getting. So let's open document number 4. That $3.5 billion, that's just like you and I going and buying a house for $350,000. At the end of that 30-year mortgage, we will not have paid $3.5 billion or $350,000 if we were buying a house. We're actually going to be paying much more. And the CRC has already told us what we're going to be paying for. We're going to be paying for bond interest of nearly $1 billion. We're going to be paying for operation and maintenance costs on the bridge of about $58 million. We're going to pay to collect the tolls. We have to pay the people that are collecting the tolls for us. And we have to pay for insurance and that sort of thing. So the CRC's own documents in their final environmental impact statement shows us that they're planning for an additional $2 billion in costs related to this project. And that really raises us to a $5.5 billion cost based on the CRC's own numbers. So I'd like you to open up document number 5. So I thought, oh my gosh, well, they're only telling us how they're going to get us $3.5 billion, and how are we going to pay for this extra $2 billion? And so I'm an accountant, and I tried to reconcile it, and lo and behold, the CRC has already done that for us. The CRC has already told us how much money they're going to collect, and Mr. Courtwright went through most of that. But I want you to know that they are already planning to collect $3.3 billion in tolls, okay? So they plan to get $450 million from each of the states. They plan to get $400 million from a non-existent federal program. And they hope to get $850 million in a New Starts grant that, again, we don't know whether it's going to be funded and whether it's going to be funded at the level that they're hoping for. It's really interesting. The $400 million, they testified to the Oversight Committee that there was only $500 million available nationwide, and we were asking for $400 of the $500 million available nationwide. And then they, once the legislators asked them, they admitted that other Washington state projects were competing for the same $400 million. So there are huge holes in this project. But I think what I really want you to understand is that $3.3 billion in tolls is currently what is being planned for. They'll tell you only $1.2 billion, but that's only covering the capital costs. They have to collect an additional $2 billion to pay for the interest and the operation and maintenance on the bridge. So what are you going to get for that? Let's open up document number 7. Southbound commuters are going to save 1 minute on their commute. That is according to the CRC's own final environmental impact statement. And if you go to page 2, just scrolled up to page 2, the northbound commuters are going to save 8 minutes. They'll tell you that you'll save 20 minutes, but you save 20 minutes if you start at I-84 and travel all the way up to the fairgrounds. So they use that 20-minute number all of the time, but really the savings in the actual corridor where it's actually congested is only an 8-minute savings on their current project. When we start eliminating what they told us they were going to eliminate, remember Victory Braid, Marine Drive flyover, the SR 500 connection, one of the questions I've had to legislators in the last few weeks is, what does that do to your northbound commute savings in the afternoon? So let's talk about the map. Go to document number 8, please. So a couple of things I realized. When the CRC is telling the legislators how much each of the interchanges cost, this is the map that they normally give us, okay? This is their document, not my document. That red section there, those are Oregon interchanges, and they're according to the CRC, that document is, those interchanges cost $595 million. According to the CRC's, okay, let's just stop. Yeah. I don't know what happened there. The purple part, back to document number 8, please. So what's important here to understand is the Oregon interchanges that cost $595 million. The Oregon interchanges that cost $595 million, according to the CRC's own budget, those interchanges cost $791 million. The bridge that they say costs $1.2 billion, that purple part, that according to the CRC's map that they show the legislators, they're telling legislators, well, the bridge costs $1.2 billion. When you look at their actual budget, and this budget's so detailed, it tells me the linear feet of pavement that's going to be poured at each interchange, okay? The actual cost to tear down the old bridges and build the new bridge, $750 to $800 million. Same thing for the Washington interchanges. Washington interchanges cost not $430 million like they tell us there, but closer to $700 million. So what does that mean? What that means is the fact that the costs of the interchanges are being understated here and the cost of the bridge is being overstated. They're shuffling the costs of the interchanges into the cost of the bridge. So why does that matter to you and to me? Because the cost of the bridge is what is going to be tolled. So when you're paying a toll to drive south, you're not only paying for the bridge, but you're also paying partially for Washington's interchanges, and you're paying partially for Oregon's interchanges as well. This is all information, again, that is CRC information, but it's not told in the way, it's just not told to us candidly. Let's put it that way. I'd like to go to document number 9. I know we're moving quickly, but we want to get to questions here. One of the things we did was we went through that detailed budget. It's 34 pages. You can barely read it. You've got to blow it up on your screen on your computer just so you can read all of the components. And what we noticed was there were several items in there that they were not within that map area. So that map area is about a 5-mile corridor, right? We found that there were several projects going on that are in the budget that are outside of that corridor area. The first is TriMet's facility in Gresham. It's called Ruby Junction. They're upgrading that facility. That's where the light rail trains go at night to get maintained, and I guess that's where they sleep. That facility was built back in the 1980s. When the yellow line was built about 20 years ago, they upgraded it for about $8 million. Right now it's being upgraded for the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project for about $12 million. Both of those projects have the same number of trains that the CRC project proposes to have, but our project is not upgrading the facility for $8 million or $12 million, but rather for a cost of $50 million and year of expenditure dollars. So one of my questions is not necessarily why that project, but why so much in comparison to other projects that have upgraded the same facility with the same number of light rail trains. We're going to also help TriMet build an office building in South Portland. Again, that's not just solely for the CRC project. Obviously, that's for TriMet wide, and maybe, you know, TriMet's got a lot of problems, and some of this money from some of these projects appear to be helping them out, okay? There are bike and pedestrian projects for the Vancouver waterfront and for Hayden Island. These are separate from the actual bridge and the actual project. These are separate bike and pedestrian projects. The curation facility, not my terminology. In fact, I don't know that every time I type in curation, I look for it, I get the little error sign in Microsoft Word saying this is not a real word, you need to change your word. It's a museum, folks. Curation facility is actually code word for a museum at the fort. And there are several other environmental impact items, one east at Hood River and one north at the Lewis River. These are separate from the environmental costs that are already built into the project that are happening at the Columbia River. They testified to my list last week in Salem and said that these were all necessary mitigation projects and none of these were extras. So that is what the CRC is saying. I'm just pointing them out because they are not within that 5-mile corridor. So lastly, let's go to document number 10. So what is the economic impact of tolls? What does $3.3 billion of tolls look like? And no, that question has not been answered at all by the Columbia River Crossing Project Office. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was up in Olympia and I was testifying to the Senate Transportation Committee. And one of the questions posed to the CRC Project Office was, well, you're giving us all these positives, how much the project's worth, how much public involvement there was, but did you ever look at how many jobs we're going to get? But did you ever look at any of the negatives? The staff people were shaking their head no, and when Ms. Boyd turned around to basically ask her staff people, you know, how do I answer the question that the senator is giving me, the staff people are saying, no, we did not study the negatives, and she turned around and said, we will have to get back to you on that. But they haven't studied the negatives. They have not told the legislators how many jobs might be lost as a result of the construction, how many jobs might be lost if we're paying $3.3 billion in tolls. The CRC will say, well, we don't really know what tolls are going to be because we haven't done an investment grade study. But they've already estimated their tolls in their final environmental impact statement and their capital and finance operating plan. Their low toll rate will be $5.32 round trip. That's their low end. Their high end is $16.50-something round trip on the high end, okay? Now, their mid-range is about $8.32 per day. That's a round trip. That is not out of the ordinary. Right now, an SR 520 in Seattle, a round trip is over $10 per vehicle, just a regular vehicle. That is not including a freight vehicle or a bigger truck, etc. So what I tried to say is, okay, $3.3 billion in tolls. If we assume that 25% or 50% of those tolls are paid by the people of Southwest Washington, what does that economic impact look like? And folks, that economic impact is not something we can ignore. According to the CRC's own documents, 65% of the trips in the morning and the afternoon originate from the Southwest Washington area. So if we just assume that 50% of the tolls are paid for by the people of Southwest Washington, over 30 years, that's a $1.6 billion sucking sound out of the economy, right? That equates to $55 million a year. But that's just our discretionary funds. That's a family who says, okay, $8 per hour or $8 per day. That's a $1 per hour pay cut every single day, every single hour worked. And so if you're paying an $8 an hour or $8 a day toll times however many days you go across, are you then going to go to the movies or take your children out to eat? What are those other discretionary things that you're no longer going to be able to do? That's going to have an impact on local jobs and local business, right? That is then going to have an impact on the city, the county, as they are unable to collect the sales tax that they use to provide services. That's going to have an impact too. That's not a study that I've done, but it's a study that needs to be done, and it hasn't been done. So there's just a lot of things going on here that we're not really talking about. We're not talking about a $5.5 billion project. We're talking about a $3.5 billion project, but that's not what's going to happen. The CRC office tells you $1.2 billion in tolls, but that's only to pay capital costs of a bridge that actually does not cost $1.2 billion. It only costs $700 or $800 million. We're not talking about the $3.3 billion in tolls that they're already planning for. We're not talking about 7 years of construction, and what does that look like, and what's that tipping point for folks who will drive over the bridge. We're not talking about the impacts on downtown, and quite frankly, we're not talking about the light rail portion because we don't have a mechanism to pay for it. The citizens of Southwest Washington voted that down. CRC and CTRAN do not currently have a mechanism to pay for the light rail, and again, that's not a cheap venture. If we open up document number 11, CTRAN's own budget, you'll often hear, well, it's only $2.5 million a year for light rail. Folks, that's the net number, okay? CTRAN's own budget, that yellow line there is the actual cost of the light rail that they expect to have happen. And as you go further into the years, 4, 5, 10 years down the road, you're looking at $6, $7, $8 million a year, $9 million a year to maintain the light rail. That's, of course, before you have ticket sales, okay? So when you hear that $2.5 million number, that's the year that it opens, and that's what they're saying, well, here's our expenses minus what we hope to get for tickets, and that's that net number. The actual cost of light rail to operate and maintain it is much, much more. So I'll get off the stand here, and we'll take your questions. we're very happy to answer any questions you have. If you don't have your questions answered, I have my card here. I know Joe and John would be happy to talk to you afterward, or if you want to contact us later. So thank you.